When a massive global corporation tells you they want to shrink their carbon footprint, what exactly are they measuring to prove it? Before they even start counting, they have to define who they are. They draw a circle around all the different businesses they own and the partnerships they run to decide what actually counts as the company. This defines their reach. Then, they look inside that circle to identify every specific source of pollution they produce. To find the actual physical sources of the carbon floating up into the atmosphere, we have to focus entirely on that second step, mapping the company's physical impact. Without strict rules to categorize these different types of pollution, a business could easily design an accounting trick. They could show you the footprint of a small, clean corporate office, while completely ignoring the heavy pollution from the factories they run. Let's test this using a major car company. We'll call them ABC Manufacturing. They want to map their entire system with no hidden pollution. To do that, ABC has to divide every single gram of carbon associated with their cars into 3 standardized categories, which the industry calls Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. We can visualize this using an animated timeline mapping the physical life cycle of a car. Here, we have the ABC factory right in the center, and below it are 3 empty buckets ready to catch our emissions as we trace the journey from raw materials to the scrapyard. Notice how this timeline stretches far beyond the factory walls, expanding out to suppliers on the left and customers on the right. This wide view prevents a company from claiming a clean footprint just because their headquarters is efficient. It forces them to account for the whole system. Let's step inside the ABC factory. The immediate pollution sources are easy to spot. We have a diesel backup generator humming in the corner, and a fleet of company-owned delivery trucks idling out in the loading yard. In our diagram, these direct sources drop right into the first bucket. These are Scope 1 emissions, pollution from equipment the company owns or operates. The rule is, if you can touch the exhaust pipe or burn the fuel yourself, it's Scope 1. Scope 1 is the easiest category to measure, because the company pays for the fuel directly. But for a modern manufacturer, the fuel burned inside their own facilities is often just a small slice of their total carbon impact. Look around that same factory floor and you will see massive amounts of energy being used without a single drop of fuel burning on site. There are rows of buzzing overhead lights and giant robotic assembly arms stamping out car frames. ABC has to buy all of that continuous power from the local electricity grid. The actual carbon dioxide is billowing out of a power plant miles away, but ABC's factory is what's creating the demand for that power. In our diagram, trace that power demand from the distant plant straight into the factory, watching emissions fall into the Scope 2 bucket. Scope 2 covers purchased electricity, steam, or heating. The rule? If you plug it in, it's Scope 2. This category shifts corporate responsibility. A company can't just fix their own boilers. They have to look at where their utility company gets its energy and push for cleaner, renewable sources. Now we pull our camera completely back to look at the massive bracket spanning the entire timeline. ABC's business triggers pollution long before they build a car and long after they sell it. These are Scope 3 emissions. This covers all indirect pollution that happens because of your business, but at sources you do not own or control. If the pollution happens outside your walls, it is Scope 3. Upstream, carbon is emitted by mining iron and refining steel. Downstream, Scope 3 catches 15 years of customer driving exhaust and eventual recycling pollution. When you add up the mining and all the suppliers and decades of driving, Scope 3 often accounts for over 80%. These categories are simply the tools we use to look past the surface and see the total physical reality of a company's impact on the planet. Sorting emissions into Scope 1 for fuels, Scope 2 for power, and Scope 3 for the life cycle gives us the complete, unhidden carbon footprint.